and then I will give you guys the 6 practical things that you can use in order to make a decision knowing that you're in the will of God. Number 1 principle of last week was we were asking ourselves these questions, and these were the 10 questions we can ask to find out, are we in the will of God? Number 1 was, will this decision spiritually profit me? Will it be spiritually profitable? And remember, we were talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, on how all things are lawful. We taught that Paul was not saying that anything you want to do is lawful, because the Bible is very clear on all those things that are not lawful. For example, the 10 Commandments, they are very clear on what those are. In the New Testament, they're not erased, they're fulfilled in the commandment of love. So don't think that, now New Testament, I can think about 10 Commandments. No, they are fulfilled in love. So they're never done away with. You just won't break any of them if you're walking in perfect love. Does that make sense? So just know that there are some things that are very clear, and Paul's not referencing that, saying that like fornication or let's say adultery, taking somebody's wife. He's not saying that's lawful. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that all things that are not unlawful are lawful. That's just like saying all things that are not illegal are legal. Does that make sense? So that's what he's talking about in that verse. He's not saying a blanket statement of everything is lawful, because that's not true. Number 2 principle was, will this decision build me up? Will it put me on a path to greater spiritual maturity? You remember that? So that was number 2. Number 3, the principle we talked about number 3 was, will it slow me down in my race? Remember, we made a distinction between weight and sin. They're not the same thing. And that verse is in Hebrews, I believe, chapter 12, verse 1. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's Hebrews 12:1, when it's saying, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily besets us. They are not the same. That's why Paul makes a distinction. The sin is what we know it's wrong through Scripture. The weight is a thing that's not a sin necessarily, but it slows you down. I gave you guys an example last week about drinking wine. If you drink a glass of wine, you're not in sin per se. Right? Unless you're drinking strong drink, some kind of hard liquor or whatever, or you're drunk, now you're in sin. But I made the distinction on why I don't drink wine or even a glass of wine, because I believe it's a weight. It's not a sin to me, but it will slow me down in my race. Why? Because I don't want to be a stumbling block to my brother who may not have the self-discipline to stop at 1 glass. Does that make sense? Everything in the Bible is not black and white, like drinking wine. That is a gray area. Is it a sin? Absolutely not. But there is a verse that says that wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and those that drink are not wise. It does not say you are in sin. Therefore, it's a wisdom issue. Will I drink around a person that cannot handle that? That's not wise. That's what he's getting to. That makes sense? So that was principle number 3. Will it slow me down? The example I gave you was a person running track, a great athlete, fit condition. He gets out there, puts on combat boots and a winter coat. He can still run, but it's going to slow him down, right? It's weight. It's excess weight that's not necessary to win and run that race. So that was an example for number 3. Number 4, the question we asked ourselves was, will this decision bring me into bondage? And so what we're talking about was, if I do this, let's say we said drugs, pornography, television, food, gambling, sex, stealing, lying, gossiping, music, some people soap operas, novels, whatever. Some of those things are sin, some are not. But can you be brought under bondage of any? Only you know in your heart where you are and what you can and cannot handle. And I have to ask myself, if I'm going to make this choice or decision in my life, will it or could it eventually bring me under bondage where I cannot get out? That makes sense? I'm going fast because we covered it. Number 5, will it hypocritically cover my sin? Will it be like putting over a mask over my true intent and motive of doing something? For example, you go to a rated R movie that has a little bit of nudity, and you're saying, man, ain't this sin under me? You know, I'm not lusting after this girl. But in your heart, you secretly cannot wait to go see her. It's not a sin in and of itself. The problem comes in with the motive. I'm going, in the name of freedom, I'm going to go watch and pretend like it doesn't bother me, knowing in my heart I'm lusting after her. Does that make sense? Let me give you a distinction. On the old covenant, if you slept with a person or a person's wife, you committed adultery, right? The new covenant, New Testament says, if you look and lust after a woman, you've committed adultery even in your heart. See, many teach that improperly because Paul was actually speaking in a hyperbole, which is an exaggeration. He's not saying in your mind, if I say, man, you're fine, that I just slept with you. Does that make sense? Like 1 Corinthians 13, he's saying that if you give your body to be burned, if you give all your stuff to the poor and have not love, it's nothing. He said, if you speak in tongues of men and of angels and have not love, it is nothing. That's hyperbole. He's exaggerating for the bigger point of love. Does that make sense? So he's not saying that you will be going around speaking in tongues of men and of angels. He's saying that if these things existed without love backing them, they're worthless. It is the same exact thing we're talking about with the adultery issue. In your mind, a lustful thought does not equate to adultery. His hyperbole lets you know that this thought can take you there in behavior if you don't address the thought. Does that make sense?